I meet single moms around the country who have, autistic or neurologically atypical kids that don't have the means, and they live in a part of the country that does not have like a lot of resources in place for kids that are different, and it breaks my heart.
Let's try a few other things that I think might be interesting. One thing that wins presidential campaigns that we don't talk much about is demographers. Demographers are sometimes asked, tell me some group of people that we don't know about as a voting bloc that nobody's figured out how to speak to. And I think I have a couple of these that are candidates. I'd like to bounce
please,
them off.
yeah, I'd like this. Maybe I'll find a new audience to.
Well, okay. So the first one that I have, so these are things like soccer moms was one from years past, or exurbs between rural and suburbs, where people didn't realize that there were intermediate places. So here's one that I think is huge that hasn't been identified. Parents of super smart kids that have some kind of a learning difference that causes them to wildly underperform in school. This is something that makes me crazy because I think it's all over. Once you start seeing it, you see it everywhere. Parents are tearing their hair out.
Yep.
Teachers can't handle the kids.
Nope.
And there's just this maddening loss of human brilliance that is flushed down the toilet.
Have you come up with a name for this group?
I often refer to these as kids with learning superpowers. And I talk about teaching disabilities, which is the more dangerous version of this, that because people don't fit into the notion of what can be educated by one teacher teaching a room of 30 people to make the economics work. My belief is that, and I'll come up with a name for it for you, but I want to talk to all of the parents who are leading lives of despair saying, why is my kid wildly underperforming? And I know how smart this kid is. Why are we doing this to ourselves? And why will no one speak to it? This is, by the way, this is me, and it's been in my family for 4 or 5 generations. Really?
Well, yeah, I'm very public about the fact that my older son is autistic.
I know that.
And that when we put him in various environments, there were very, very sharp struggles. And to me, atypical is the new normal, like neurologically atypical. And you're right that as soon as you start seeing it, you see it everywhere. And that the facts show that it's incredibly commonplace. And at this point, I think most American families have someone either in the family or someone in their social circles that resembles the description that you just put out there of this group. To me, a lot of it is that our institutions just aren't well designed for people with different learning profiles or different.
And yet these are very often the people who are going to found new fields, who are going to find new drugs for us, who are going to think in such different, uncorrelated fashions, that these are very often the people that I value the most. And you never know whether the thing is going to work out because the kid every year is sustaining more and more trauma.
Yeah.
Whereas these other kids, it's like, I remember looking at the neurotypicals as if I was, I was like Cinderella watching all the other sisters go to the ball, and I was sitting there scrubbing dishes. Like, what, every conference was Eric is underperforming. Eric can't meet his potential. Eric this, that. At some point, it's just like, you don't realize how much damage you're doing to maybe as much as a fifth of the country.
Well, someone described it as like you're getting regular low-grade psychic beating.
Pretty good.
and that's something that you obviously wouldn't wish upon anyone, much less little kids.
Yeah. And by the way, the autism thing, I don't know whether your child is high functioning or not, but it's certainly the case that a lot of us have the idea that we almost don't want to deal with people who aren't in some sense on the spectrum or having some kind of ability to focus and to work with abstractions. Very often I think of, I'm on top of this, I'm colorblind, and I always make the point that I see camouflage.
Did you know that you're wearing bright purple right now?
Stop it. No, that used to happen. I used to dress myself before I let my girlfriend, now wife, make these decisions. I would make terrible decisions.
Kidding. You look great.
Thank you.
He looks great. I'm sure I have something to do with it.
So that would be one group. Here's another one that I think is really important. Now, I know that you are the child of immigrants, and that, I'm of course married to an immigrant. The temptation is for us to sort of be very defensive of our immigrants because we have some forces at the moment that have become very jingoistic. And I think that that's right. But I also think that we have to recognize that there's a story about immigration that's very unpleasant and ugly, which is how Americans have used immigration to redistribute wealth amongst ourselves. And effectively, the immigrant is used as a tool of redistribution. Then people get angry or protective of the tool. And one of the things that I think that's very important is that there's a huge chunk of America is highly xenophilic. They like foreigners. They like traveling abroad. They like food, music.
You probably read Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. You're probably friends with John, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured. Continue, because this is what it reminds me of.
Okay. The thing is that xenophilic restrictionists are a good chunk of this country. If you do a poll and you allow for all 4 boxes, xenophilic, xenophobic, restrictionist, expansionist, xenophilic restrictionism is a giant cohort. Nobody speaks to it because if you say anything about restrictionism, the media will instantaneously label you a xenophobe. Can we at least distinguish the idea of the immigrants as souls like ourselves who have been an important part of our national tapestry, together with the fact that very often they are used as instruments of transfers of wealth? And
I agree.
And that we should be angry at our fellow Americans who cynically use immigration and hide behind the immigrant to take money from one sector and put it into their own pockets.
Or you should not be angry at someone who's angry about the immigrants.
Well, this is the thing.
Because there's something, like you said, it's like, in some ways someone can have a very legitimate grievance about the fact that there have been these instruments of wealth transfer that have been imported into our midst.
So I call these the Americans who redistribute our wealth immigrant-entrepreneurs, right? And the idea is that if they could use puppy dogs to redistribute our wealth, they'd use puppy dogs because nobody can be against puppies, right? Yeah. And so it's a very cynical use of the Statue of Liberty. It's something that's very difficult to talk about, but it's something that I've been talking about for a while because I think that I'm so far in the xenophilic category, it would be comical if somebody decided I actually had a problem. So I've been bold, and I haven't really had the problem. But most Americans feel very uncomfortable talking about immigration because they have 2 different feelings. They, one, have a really good feeling about the person that they know who happened to come from Uganda or India, and they have the sense that something is wrong with this story. We're going to have to disentangle it and restore something that makes us feel good about it rather than uncomfortable.
I agree.
Great.
Yeah. And, I think I may be able to help in this regard.
I think you're perfectly positioned for this.
I'm the son of immigrants who loves this country, loves that immigrants have been an incredible source of dynamism. But, you can't have open borders and unrestricted immigration. I understand the sentiment where people are struggling with the fact that our country has brought many people in, either intentionally or unintentionally, in ways that are changing our economy and society in ways that, some people have legitimate problems with.
I think we need to be able to have an open conversation about difficult topics around this and pull them apart. And the fact is, we need people to feel comfortable that it's okay to feel uncomfortable as long as you're trying to explore it. But the current president, for my money, gets way too close to jingoistic sentiments.
Yeah, and that's one of the natural reactions, is that if the current president says one thing, then, the right thing to do is say the exact opposite. But then the nuance gets lost, and then unfortunately we end up falling into these polarized camps.
It's so important not only to defeat the current president, but also to defeat the kleptocratic center of our own party, as well as the regressive left that poses as the progressive left, and then to take care of the constituents that are currently all over the spectrum in a new world. And this is one of the things I love about your slogan, which is not left or right, but forward, right?
Yes, that's the slogan.
Yeah, and that thing is that it's a question.
It also happens to be the truth. It's not just
I know, so, yeah. But that's the thing. It's moving out of flatland. Like we've been given this smorgasbord of bad options, and just say, hey, I don't think I want to dine from there. I think these things that are available off menu. Do you mind if I like, for example, Starbucks, I think, will sell you a short cup of coffee, but they won't put it on the menu. You have to know to ask for it. So I like to think of you as the guy who somehow knows that there are things that aren't on the menu.
I am animal style at In-N-Out. I am. Andrew Yang is animal style.
Let me give you.
No, I agree that I can change the political conversation in a way that many Americans find very exciting and productive, because 25% of Americans are politically disengaged, including, I'm sure, some people watching this. And I believe it's up to 48% self-identify as independent, which is almost twice what identify as either Democratic or Republican.
I'm so close to identifying as independent. I can't stand my own party, but my feeling is I have to stay there and say, hey, we're out of control in order to save the structure, because
the two-party system, I mean, I agree. That's why I'm running as a Democrat in part. It's like, well, you have these two parties. Maybe you can turn one of them into like a highly functioning party with great ideas and the rest of it. I mean, that's like an easier solution than
Andrew, what I really want to do is I want the insurgency that you and I have been sort of a part of, this loose collection of people who are thinking completely off the menu, to start retaking our institutions. We always had heterodox people of high caliber who are, effectively heretics, housed inside the Harvards and MITs and Caltechs. And I think we've gotten rid of that kind of
Or if
diversity.
they are there, then they're scared shitless to like say the wrong thing, or else they'll get...
Well, do you remember the time, you remember that situation where MIT turned over Aaron Swartz?
I shouldn't laugh because, I mean, it's dark.
But we should laugh.
No, I mean,
I'm for laughing at the dark.
Yeah, I laugh at the dark. It's,
it's like everybody knows that, but you're not allowed to do it in public. So screw that. We had the situation with this guy, Aaron Swartz.
Did you know Aaron?
No. Did you?
He's a friend of friends.
Yeah. And this guy almost certainly was a pretty pure hearted human being who was fighting a good fight. MIT is supposed to shelter those people. And instead they cooperate, in turning them over.
As soon as you get the institutional incentives in a particular direction, then this is not near, and this is just like recent because in recent memory, but I stuck up for Shane Gillis, this comedian that had said
I saw that, and the idea that, you were in a position to say, look, I'm the candidate
personally, actually, yeah. And so if anyone should be offended, it's me. And so if I think he shouldn't lose his job over it.
Well, this is the thing. The quality of mercy or forgiveness or just recognition that there should be space for remorse and redemption. This is what makes so much of the intolerant left feel cult-like. And I thought what you were doing was you were showing the best aspects of a truly compassionate left.
I was trying to be a human being, like you looked at him being like, well, like, is that a job losing offense? But then the fact that NBC ended up firing him was entirely consistent with our corporate incentives. Because if you look at it, say like, well, is this person that we've invested a lot in that's a revenue generator for us? No, because he hadn't even worked for one day. It's like, are our corporate incentives to can him and thus put an end to any controversy or advertisers or whatnot that would be troubled by it? Yeah. So it's like, so if you'd asked me, it's like, hey, do you think he's going to be fired? I'd be like, yeah, he's almost certainly going to be fired because that's what the corporate incentives.
Well, I understand that. So one of the things that I'm really interested in doing,
but it still made me sad. Like I was like, hey, this would be unusually human and forgiving if they decided to.
Well, they lost a teachable moment, because one of the things that's going on is that so much of the information economy is very, very marginal in the sense that you're almost producing a public good. So, for example, I slap ads on my podcasts, and what
I stuff from his sponsors.
What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to two new models. One of which I'm calling reverse sponsorship, where I shout out some great company, which doesn't know that I'm going to say something positive, and maybe they become sponsors, maybe they don't. But the other one is risk advertisers, where people get to know me over long periods of time. And the hope is that you're going to say, look, you're not going to catch me being horrible and bigoted and all of these things, but I might say something dangerous, like something I just said about immigration. And will you make sure that you will not run away from me during the period where the mob descends and the frenzy is at its worst?
Wow.
Right? Because if we don't fix the economic models, we can't have deeper discussions because everybody's going to run away at the first sight of trouble. And so part of what we're trying to do ultimately with the advertising
Look at this, pirate radio pre-advertising.
What do you think?
I mean, I love it. It's like, leave it to you to try and solve that kind of problem.
All right, I got some other things that I want to talk about is demographics.
Oh yeah, please.
Okay.
So let me first say, I am a parent of a neurologically atypical young person. I agree with you that I think that many of people have a different perspective are going to end up being contributors in highly distinctive ways. I will say that even kids who are not going to be contributors in highly distinctive ways still deserve schools that can support and accommodate them. And that, to me, these kids are, like, the shorthand I use is that they're spiky. You know, it's like you have very high capacities in some respects or a different point of view, and then real challenges in other respects. And so if I send you into a social environment where there are 30 kids for one teacher, you're going to have a terrible, terrible time, you know, and that's 100% predictable. And so if then you have like a critical mass of people that resemble this, then you should try and design an institution that takes that into account. And I feel so deeply for families that struggle with this, like you struggle with it. Sounds like you've experienced it. I've struggled with it. And you and Pia, you know, and me and Evelyn, like, we have an unusual level of ability to try and, you know, manage situation. And I meet single moms around the country who have, you know, autistic or neurologically atypical kids that don't have the means, and they live in a part of the country that does not have like a lot of resources in place for kids that are different. And it breaks my heart. Like the fact that there are all of these kids that are heading into these schools that are getting, you know, more than low grade psychic beatings. I mean,
oh my God. This is why I leave my DMs open on Twitter. And this is one of the number one things I do it for, is people write to me and they say, I know you're really busy, but I just want to tell you, nobody had ever spoken to my situation. You're proud of something I'm always ashamed of. And
I guarantee you I'm not the first presidential candidate with autism in the family.
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm the first talking about it is, to me, long overdue and ridiculous. And
amen.
And, you know, and I get some of the same messages that you get, but, you know, like, I want to actually try and solve the problem for those families. I mean, it makes me feel glad that they feel spoken to and that they realize they're not the only ones going through it.
I want to see more money going to figure out how do we diversify the classroom of the future.
Yeah.
So that the load isn't borne by people who don't fit the economics of the teaching model.
Yes. And part of it is that we regard the education of our kids as a cost. And so then the city then is like, well, I can't afford to have like a teacher for your neurologically atypical kid. And so what we have to do is talk about inverting the model. Is you have to look at the education of our children as an investment. And then you say, what's that? Like, these kids require, you know, like X and Y, then we should make that investment with the certainty, and I share your confidence in this, that you have a couple of those kids do something highly atypical and remarkable, then that pays for whatever support or teachers or infrastructure. Movement.
I mean, I just had a very well-known professor revealed to me that he couldn't read papers in his field. Like, he just can't read, you know, and he has to figure out what the paper is likely to be saying. There is such a weird world of unexpected achievement.
And this is the demon. This is the demon that we have to slay in many ways. Is that the negative externalities are not being encompassed within the budgets of various institutions.
Very well said.
But then also we're foregoing all of the potential positive value creation or generation from proper investment in our human capital. Mm-hmm. And another dimension too, and this is like neither here nor there, but I was just with Dean Kamen in New Hampshire, and he was talking about how the FDA, like, all their incentives are just to like regulate the shit out of anything. And then I said to him, I was like, you know what they should start measuring is the foregone utility of keeping something away from people. Like if you had something, and
what is the opportunity cost of the regulation?
Yeah, he had this prosthetic limb that he was trying to give to vets, and the FDA was making it really hard for him to do so. And he was like, "Are you kidding me? I'm trying to give limbs to vets who had amputated, and so by your making it hard for me to do so, like you multiply like all of the limbless vets who aren't getting a limb, like, you know, it's like, so if you had that as like an actual measurement for the FDA, it's like you need to have these companies internalize the negative externalities of things like pollution and the rest of it, but you almost need like our institutions, like our schools and our regulatory agencies to start trying to somehow capture the potential gains from investing in our kids or allowing a certain innovation into the market. Like the big problems are that our measurements are really primitive, and it ends up, and you end up with binary incentives where you lose a lot of the value, and so you end up being like, hey, don't have a teacher for your kid, so your kid's gonna, you know, just end up sidelined.
What?
And sidelined is like a euphemistic way for saying destroyed.